with your favorite special education teacher, Frank Avella. This video will cover everything you would ever need to know about special education. This video is intended for parents, general education teachers, special education teachers, and even students. We'll begin with a brief overview of special education. Special ed is intended to educate students in a way that addresses their specific needs. So what is the purpose? It should build upon and enhance a student's strengths, but also identify their weaknesses, say mathematics, and provide supports for that specific weakness to help them succeed in those areas. The history of special education was a long journey, beginning where disabled children were excluded from education and placed in institution-like schools, to now where children are protected by law. A large number of special education students feel a stigma from being labeled. Unfortunately, that label causes these students to feel shame and resent the school system in general. This label also leads teachers into the soft bigotry of low expectations. Teachers feel sorry for these students and don't expect them to be able to succeed. And wrongly so, they dumb down their teaching. Next, how do students become eligible for special education services? Well, it starts with a referral. In fact, schools have an obligation to, quote, find children with disabilities. The referral leads to a comprehensive evaluation using psychometric tests. Licensed school personnel carry out these tests and interpret their results. An IEP team is formed and they make the determination of eligibility. The determination is measured by 2 criteria points. First, the child must fall into one of the 14 identified disabled categories. Second, the disability must be adverse to the child's education. If criteria is met, an IEP is written. The IEP must be followed by teachers and school personnel. Annual meetings must take place as well. Moving on to the least restrictive environment, LRE. The LRE describes a cascade of services for students, and that basically describes the various educational settings that special education students are placed in. The least restrictive environment is one where special education students spend most of their time with non-disabled peers, meaning a general education classroom. A more restrictive environment is one where students spend part of their day in special education classes and the other part of their time in the general education classes. Getting more restrictive is having students spending their entire day in special education classes. A further restrictive environment is to place students in an all special education school, where they don't get any time with non-disabled peers. Lastly, we have a homebound or residential setting. Students are further isolated and kept from non-disabled peers. This setting is considered the most restrictive of all settings mentioned here. Now, we're going to move on to the Individualized Education Plan, the IEP. Students that are classified as having a disability are given an IEP, which is a legal document to be enforced. The first component of an IEP is a statement of services, which details the types of services the child will receive. The rationale aligns with the statement of services. IEPs must have both short-term and long-term goals. The goals must be measurable and as specific as possible. Next is the present level of educational performance, which simply describes how a student is currently doing. IEPs must have the projected dates for initiation and duration of services. Next is accommodations and modifications. Accommodations must be put in place for state testing. Students need to have a plan for transition and post-secondary life beginning at the age of 16 until they graduate from high school. Now let's take a look at some of the major legislation that created this system of special education. First up is Public Law 94-142. The cornerstone is FAPE, which stands for Free and Appropriate Public Education for All Children. Next, it makes improvements to Public Law 94-142 in terms of research and technology for special education. The law also brings to attention bilingual education. Next up is No Child Left Behind. This act is best known for school choice and giving options to students that attend schools that do not meet their annual yearly progress. Continuing with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, this law ensures equity and accountability for special needs students. It addresses the response to intervention, RTI, and lastly, ESSA gives more power to the states in terms of choosing their standards. It also retains some policies of standardized testings from No Child Left Behind. On to classroom instruction. and the first topic is modifications. Modifications are a change to the content or learning goal for a student. The first example is to allow alternative reading books and materials for special ed students. The books may be tailored to their interest and based on their reading level. You can provide opportunities to retake quizzes. A more common modification may be allowing students to make corrections on problems that they previously got wrong. The next example is to provide word banks on their exams. This would, of course, be for fill-in type questions. Some teachers reduce the number of questions on their tests for special education students. These are modifications that general education students would not receive. Next are accommodations. Accommodations are a change in the way a student can access content or tests. The first example is preferential seating. The students get closer and closer to access the teacher during the lesson. If students have trouble accessing material through writing, you can use books on tape. Students can get extended time during testing. They can have longer duration of access to questions and test content. Some teachers use accommodations that go as far as to allow for open notebooks during testing. Next, we move on to some actual teaching strategies for special education students. Special education students, more than most, require differentiated instruction, and teachers can differentiate by 3 different ways: the content, the process, and the product. Classroom lessons and assignments should be broken down into smaller, more manageable tasks. Formative assessment is important because these students quickly fall behind their non-disabled peers. Graphic organizers will specifically help by outlining connections between concepts and ideas. Teachers should use questioning techniques to keep students engaged and help expand on their existing knowledge. Problem-solving strategies will help close the existing achievement gaps found in their standardized test scores. Help these students out by sending reminders time and time again, and use technology to do it. And lastly, build cognitive rigor through lesson objectives to develop the necessary critical thinking skills. Next, the classroom environment. The classroom environment may be adapted for special education students. One way is to limit visual distractions. This includes bright, dazzling posters, models, and figures. Teachers should create and enforce speaker rules. This will limit the amount of interruptions that occur. For special needs students that quickly forget, labels can really come in handy for classroom supplies. Teachers should also provide class schedules for further organization. Relaxing music will often help settle down a rambunctious classroom of students. Teachers need to instill protocols for actions such as going to the bathroom, sharpening pencils, and much, much more. Students should have proper lighting so they can see the board and their assignments. And special needs students must take preference in the seating arrangement. Next is behavior intervention strategies. Special educators of today are becoming more and more familiar with applied behavior analysis as a scientific approach to behavior management. Functional behavioral assessments, known as FBAs, are used to find the root causes of problem behavior. Behavior intervention plans are created using data from FBAs along with data from ABC charts, meaning antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Many special education schools are incorporating positive behavior intervention and support systems. Positive student behavior can earn them privileges and cash and tokens for rewards. The next section is assistive technology. Assistive technology does not include medical devices that are surgically implanted or the replacement of the device. Examples of AT include specialized wheelchairs, switches and controls, various apps, pencil grips, on-off voice activation, calculators, and much, much more. Assistive technology should lead to an increase in productivity, performance, and learning. It should also be used for vision, hearing, memory, and much, much more. Now let's take a look at curriculum. Special education students in particular benefit from emergent curriculum, which are projects and activities that have been inspired by student interest. Similarly, there is functional curriculum, which focuses on basic living skills along with vocational skills. Just because these students are special needs doesn't mean they shouldn't be challenged with higher order thinking skills. The curriculum should reflect that. Special education students usually require a slower pace of curriculum delivery as compared to general education students. And lastly, cooperative learning can be used as a way to foster soft skills for special needs students. Now, on to the inclusion movement. The inclusion movement is the belief that students with disabilities belong in the general education classroom. This movement is based on an idea that there are no excuses to leaving special needs students out of the general education classroom. The school just needs to find a way to make it work. And one way to make it work is by providing supports for the student. The supports are designed to help students reach the ultimate goal of a diploma. And if it isn't working, schools create alternative paths to get a diploma. On to families of special needs students. Educators should look to build relationships with families of special needs students. The first step towards building a relationship with families is to create a safe and supportive environment. Basically, the school needs to do its job first. Educators should be professional in their meetings with their families. Families are going to have their concerns, and it's up to the educators to explore these concerns. Educators also have a duty to inform parents of their rights. Many schools today hand out advocacy pamphlets. Thank you for staying with me. Don't